This podcast is all about getting divorced without losing your mind, where Corey Shapiro, a seasoned New York City divorce attorney, shares valuable insights from his book, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. He'll teach you how to be more creative and less reactive in your divorce. He also dives into discussions with experts and thought leaders on navigating divorce intelligently and calmly.
Welcome to Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind, the book and podcast to help you become more creative and less reactive in your divorce. And don't you want to be more creative and less reactive? Isn't being reactive where all the problems start? But it's so hard to slow down. We're just stressed. We're angry. We're going through a lot. How can we bring the better side of ourselves to our divorce, especially early in the process where all of the most important, usually the most important decisions are made early in the process, even maybe before lawyers are involved. So think of this podcast as a companion to you, to your thought process while you're going through a difficult divorce. We're dealing with the budget. This is the third video of our series, but don't worry, you can find all of the other series on the podcast. We have 5 videos in total on the divorce budget. We started off with the resources. We moved into the emotion. Today, we're doing the money budget, where most people think that's really what the budget is, and it's a big part of it. Then we're going to finish up with the energy budget and the time budget. So first of all, when we think of the money budget and we're trying to make the divorce as economical, as efficient as possible, I think a big problem is, especially people who don't want the divorce, is that we may not be through the stages of grieving. You know, the 5 stages, there might be so many stages of grieving. I think it takes about 2 years to grieve, but you know, all that anger, that depression, that bargaining, all that process you have to go through to finally get to the ultimate stage. And it might not be the ultimate stage, but I think this is the ultimate stage. It is the acceptance stage. Accepting the end of your marriage, accepting practically what has to be done to unwind this sometimes long, decades long relationship. And sometimes these relationships started when people are in high school, you know, in their 20s. There's such different people, maybe when they're getting divorced in their 40s or 50s or even later. And there's so much history, so much maybe even bad blood. And it's tough to be practical. And when you start thinking about a divorce, you can't even think practical. It's like almost like a wedding. It's so emotional. Of course, you're going to spend so much money. But let me give you the short answer. The short answer, you're going to have to fake it till you make it, because divorces can get expensive. And if you ever hear a judge say this, you know you have to listen. And this is what normally happens when you first get to court. The judge says, listen, we don't want you to spend your children's college education on your lawyers. Don't want you to do that. So hopefully you have trusted advisors. Good lawyers are going to help you through the process. And if you don't have that, borrow some wisdom from trusted advisors, some trusted sources like this podcast, like my book, who are going to give it to you straight. How do you even know if you have a trusted advisor? It's a great question. It's a great question. And I think the answer is it's going to feel right. It's going to feel right. But sometimes you have to verify. We're going to go through some things to just ensure, even if you have an attorney that feels right, ensure that your money is being used wisely. But before we get into that, for our listeners who know, it's time for our quote. And I love thinking about quote. I love borrowing wisdom. That's why I have these owls behind me, trying to bring our best selves from this time as we work on the divorce, not in the divorce. And let's go right to a superstar, former superstar from the golden age of Hollywood, Cary Grant. And if you don't know Cary Grant, you have never seen any of his movies, you are missing out. Do a little Rotten Tomato or Wikipedia search and check out some of his movies, especially his later movies with Hitchcock. Supposedly one of the best work he has done. Now, his quote is, "Divorce is a game played by lawyers." And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool, Cary Grant coming up with that quote. But then I learned he's been divorced 4 times, 5 times marriage. He had a very, very difficult upbringing, and I think that contributed to his problems with women. But, 5 times a charm. So let's start thinking about the money budget. And let me just give you 3 big concepts to think about. The first concept is this idea of violating the spirit of these laws that are designed to protect what we call non-money spouses. So there's moneyed spouses. This is the ones who, make all the money. And then you have non-money spouses. That's going to be traditionally the people who are stay-at-home. And of course, a lot of people who get divorced are substantially similar. But if there's a wide spread between their incomes and wealth, you have a moneyed spouse situation and a non-money spouse situation. And these laws that were designed to protect the non-moneyed spouse. So that means when you can go to court and you're a non-moneyed spouse, you can get spousal support, you can get attorney fees. If you're the primary, you can get child support. All these laws were designed to help you, right? But the presumption is that the moneyed spouse is a baddie, is acting bad, doesn't want an efficient divorce. And I think that's changing because the laws are clear in most jurisdictions. And if you know what's coming and you don't want to waste money, a lot of the moneyed spouses do act very rationally and think of it like unwinding a business. Of course, there's others who act out as well. And that's what the law is designed to protect. But here's the problem. There's no incentive, no financial incentive. If you have an attorney who's representing a non-moneyed spouse and you have a moneyed spouse who's acting appropriately, there's no incentive for this non-moneyed spouse, unless they're a trusted advisor, to act efficiently. So how do you know they're acting efficiently? Well, you want to take a look at these invoices that come. Generally, lawyers invoice every 30 days, some lawyers every 2 weeks, even some lawyers every week if there's extensive billing. And you really want to look at it. A lot of the non-money spouses are so overwhelmed with the finances and they think, well, they're not going to really pay it anyway. I don't need to look at it. But the problem is the money spouse is going to see these bills. And if you have an attorney who's really a wolf in sheep's clothing, someone who's not really a trusted advisor looking out more for them than you, then that's not going to come off well in settlement and also in high litigation. So you want to make sure that your attorney is not just, just churning, not just billing, being a sort of a hamster on a wheel, not really going anywhere. Now, if you're thinking, well, I don't really have to do this, Corey, because, if I'm the non-money spouse, what I understand is I'm not going to have to pay the attorney fees. So why does it matter? Well, first of all, you're going to have to pay some. Just because you're a non-money spouse, you don't get zero in most cases. You're going to have to pay some. And they factor in, your income. And if you don't make income, they can even impute income to you based on your earning capacity. That means as if you were working. So if I was, for example, an investment banker 2 years before the divorce, I say, I just want to be a tennis instructor, but there was some disagreement about that. Maybe the court can say, my earning capacity is not really a tennis instructor. It's really more of an investment banker. That's how this happens. Or if I am a stay-at-home parent, I have maybe a law license, but I haven't really practiced in many years. My earning capacity could be, after a year or two of ramping up, a much higher amount than you think. And when the court figures everything out, you might have to contribute to these lawyer fees, and these lawyer fees might not have been helpful. They might have been unnecessary. So the final concept I want you to understand is there's going to be a meaningful reallocation. If that's just a mouthful and you're like, whoa, I'm just like totally lost. You're talking about money spouses. You're talking about these attorneys who think more about themselves and not really helping me. How can this be? That's just a sad state we're in. You have to be careful. everyone out there have to be careful. But a meaningful reallocation is, think of this. We're going to have a pie, and there's 8 slices to a pie. And if you take, 6 slices to the pie, but it really should be, let's say you really only should have 4 slices, half of the pie. Then how do we reallocate that to make it equitable? And that's what a reallocation does. How many slices did you take? And they try to figure it out. Are you really deserving 2 more slices? You get really 6 slices out of an 8 slice pie. Is that fair? And the answer is no. So these concepts are hard to think about, especially if you're grieving, but let's just make sure you understand it. I'm going to give you 2 examples to make this even clearer. So don't worry. So first, laws are designed to protect non-moneyed spouses because of decades of abuse by moneyed spouses. And these laws are now being used more often than not as a sword, not as a shield, not to protect. There's a presumption that these laws is that the moneyed spouse is acting out, is being aggressive, is bulldozing you, requiring you to spend all this money. But in truth, a lot of moneyed spouses want to be economical, want to be efficient, especially if they've gone through the stages, especially if they want to move on to the next chapter of their lives. And even if you are the non-moneyed spouse, you may have to share some of these attorney fees if the billing is unreasonable. So you're on the hook even if you have a lawyer who's unscrupulous. So let me give you an example to make this clear. When you get those invoices, please look at them. Within 30 days, just look at them. And if you have any questions, ask your attorney. So let me give you just something that's like a red herring, a simple one. Let's say you see a billing and you see a line item for an email that's sent to you, but there's 3 people at the firm who are charged, and they charge 0.1. 0.1 is 6 minutes. They usually do in 6-minute increments. So you see 0.1, let's say a partner, 0.1 an associate, 0.1 a paralegal. Okay. All for the same email. Now, why is that? And you have to determine, is that triple billing? 3 people doing something that 1 person could have done? Or was there a reason that 3 people had to bill that? And those things add up. All right. So you have to be careful for when there's double or triple billing. Double billing is just 2 people on the same email. So that's when you have attorneys who are trying to just milk the system. The other thing is something that you could do. A lot of times when you're emotional, you want to text, you want to email a thought that comes in your mind immediately, and you want a response immediately. And I understand that. It's when you want something, you want something. But the problem is you're going to pay for that. So is it possible to, unless it's an emergency, to maybe have a standing meeting with your attorney, or every other week having a meeting, more of like a therapist model, could even be on a monthly basis or a weekly basis, whatever cadence you think you need in the beginning, as opposed to 3 or 4 exchanges a day, which is inefficient. First of all, inefficient in time, and we'll get into time, also inefficient in money. So you can see, some lawyers, not trusted advisors. Let me get that out straight, not trusted advisors. And you also have, sometimes you are contributing to the increase in your money budget because of where you are in your grieving stages. And you might not be thinking clearly. But just think of this in other contexts. When I get paid that first time, and I maybe, back in the day, living at home, and you get that paycheck and you have all this money, you might go to, Bloomingdale's, for example, and buy this expensive present, which you really can't afford. I mean, you think you can afford it, but you're not paying rent, you're not paying utilities, you're not saving, but it's not free money. All right. So you're much smarter to maybe, save that money or buy a gift that's more reasonable, more in your budget. But it's so hard to do that. I appreciate that. And sometimes you just want what you want. That's what gifts are for. I have a rule that at least once a year, you got to buy something, that's just emotional, and maybe even quarterly, just to give you something. It doesn't have to be so expensive, but something that's, frivolous, just something fun. Doesn't have to be so expensive, but just something that's just fun. And unfortunately, when you're in a divorce situation, you're building to that fun place, but this is not the time to waste money frivolously. All right. So that's what we are on the money budget. And next week, we're going to focus on the energy budget. And we're going to talk in detail about what you could do to make your energy go the distance. You know, like those Red Bulls, like you want to go the distance. That's what you want in these energy. Actually, I've been watching Wimbledon as I record this podcast. I think it's up to the semifinals. And, you know, there were some long matches on the women's side going 3 sets deep into a tiebreaker. The men, there's been a lot of 5-setters. How do they become efficient using their energy wisely? And sometimes these divorces are like that. They're a marathon, and you got to build energy. The good thing about that is you don't have to do that overnight. You have time to build it up, and we'll go over how you can do that. So I want you all to realize, if you're listening to this podcast and you're going through a difficult divorce, I want to congratulate you because you took time out to work on your divorce. You're not just in it, and you're not alone. You know, you have at least me who's helping you think about things in a more creative and not reactive way. And you will get divorced. Might not be exactly the way you want it, but it's probably not going to be as bad as you think either. So stay strong, stay positive, and until next time, let's be creative, not reactive. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. We would love to hear your feedback. Send Corey an email to feedback@gettingdivorced.org. And if you've read his book, please consider leaving an Amazon review. This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.